We got Gary McDonald from Springfield, Illinois, and he's going to tell you about himself, and I'll leave it at that. How's that sound?
That sounds great, Mike. The only problem is now I don't know who I am. How's everybody doing? Get enough to eat? I'm just going to forewarn you, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I make things up as I go along. My memory's not good enough to write anything down and try to remember what my plans are, so I just start talking and goes from there. I've been doing this a while. I'm a little bit different than most people. When I got started in this business, I drew on a lot of history even before I got started. I was exposed to this type of farming in 1980. It was not called organic farming. It was called biohumic agriculture production system. It was organic. All biohumic agriculture production farmers were organic farmers, but not all organic farmers are biohumic agriculture production farmers. And of course, now the term biohumic is just gone. I mean, the company that promoted that, the company that taught me, the company that had a group of farmers together that I learned from, I would say most of them are dead. I've not run into any. I'm still alive. The last one I knew was a guy named Willis Wiegand there in Illinois. Amazing person, amazing farm, and tremendous inspiration to be to his farm. And he passed away, I think, about 5 years ago. And because they kind of got out of the way, I guess I'm going to be the new old-timer someday. And I don't know whether I like that or not, but anyhow, I started out growing up on a farm that was a livestock farm and a grain farm, and my dad had rented the farm because Dad was the kind of guy, he didn't want to rent a farm out from underneath anybody else, so he wouldn't take a farm if he felt somebody else needed it worse than he did. A different mindset than we have today. So there were 7 of us kids in the family, and Dad and Mom, and Dad rented a farm that he had the landlord come to him and ask him if he'd farm it because the 2 tenants before him had went broke on that farm. They couldn't make enough money to feed themselves, so they left after 1 year. And Dad went there and worked together with the land owner that had taken over from his parents, so he was a guy about my dad's age. And what had happened, this farm was one of those farms where it had the upland land and then it had the bottom land, and so it had some of the bluff area. And there was a gully on that farm that us kids used to play in a lot. It was about 40 foot deep and about a quarter of a mile long. And at the mouth of it, what they did is they come in and they built a dam and they put a spillway and then a hold basin to stop the soil. This farm had just literally washed away. And so I grew up not realizing at that time I was being prepared for what I've done for the last 38 years. And that was watch Dad build a farm up from nothing but the clay subsoil. And I didn't really watch it real close because what's it mean to a kid? I can remember the landowner making the statement to me when I got old enough to understand a little bit. He says, conventional agriculture is a temporary form of agriculture. What'd that mean to me? It didn't really mean anything to me. But these things all added up over time. Had a neighbor that inherited 300-400 acres right across the fence from where my dad farmed, and he was a carpenter by trade, but he married a young gal that was the daughter of the people that owned the farm, and he rented the farm, and him and his wife farmed it. And he was one of these guys that was very smart, really liked the guy. And over the years, he did exactly everything the university said you should do. He was very smart. And my dad and all the old-timers around there said that someday he'll leave that farm with nothing but a suitcase. And that's exactly what happened. So a lot of times we, as farmers, have to take the information that we get and we have to kind of make it our own. And we have to kind of make it fit us and our personality and our machinery and the topography of our farm and the soil types and all of that. Because something that'll work on my farm, something that's worked for me in my life coming up to here, doesn't mean that's going to give you the same results. So I just want to throw that out here because I've been around enough to know that there are different soils than what I've got. And they all offer different kinds of challenges. And you, the farmer, the fact that you're uniquely you have the ability to make your ideas and concepts flex and work for your farm. So I remember a story a guy named Irvin Jasperson told me. He was a guy that had a big impact on my success and what I'm going to share with you. He one day was out in the field farming for his dad, and he was running a new Alice Chalmers tractor, and his dad was really proud of that tractor. His dad was over, I don't know how many yards, they'd call it rods back then rather than yards, and he was planting with the horse, and Irvin was driving the tractor, and he found out that he'd go back there on the harrow, and he'd take that lever, and he'd flatten those teeth just a little bit. He'd get that old Alice Chalmers go a gear faster. Well, he went across the grass waterway and rolled the tractor over. And he says that he remembers his dad coming towards him. It's like he only took 3 strides to get there, and he was a quarter mile away. And he feared for his life. And he said his dad just leaned down when he got to him. He says, "Boy, think a little." And he says he was sure glad that that's the route he took rather than the one he thought he was going to take. So I want you all to think a little bit. A lot of times in agriculture, when we go and get our educations, what happens, we are told what to think, not how to think. And then organic agriculture comes along. And all of a sudden now it's different. You got weeds? Oh, you pick up the phone? Who are you going to call to take care of them for you? It's your problem. It's our problem. You got a fertility problem? You pick up the phone? Who are you going to call to fix it? Because we have to build our own fertility in this business. So it's not like the conventional agriculture model where everything's done for us. So it gets to be a little bit of a challenge for us to figure out how we can make this all work. And a lot of it is because we forget that the most important thing is our 3-pound brain. I have no problem taking a farm from day one, be weed-free and high-yielding, but to take a 3-pound brain, that's next to impossible. It's difficult to change a brain. And you've got the choices, and you have to make the decisions to whether you're going to let that brain develop and learn what it needs to develop and learn so you can be a success in this business. I'm kind of obsessive compulsive. I don't want a single weed absolutely positively in the field. And since I've started farming this way on my own ground, I wish I could get every farmer to embrace this, but I've not been successful doing that. Like I said, I can change soil, but I can't change the 3-pound brain. And that's the thing that we have. That's an inside job we all have to do for ourselves. But anyhow, as I was growing up on the farm, then I started working off the farm because obviously by the time I was 13 years old, I realized something very profound. Even though Dad was a lot older than me, I was a lot smarter than he was. And so I didn't get along with Dad. He was kind of like I am now, obsessive compulsive disorder, and the nut never falls far from the tree. And so I was working with other farmers off the farm, and Dad was pretty much organic back then, but back then organic was conventional. We were changing from organic or what it was back when everybody was doing it to now starting to use some amabam and some knoxweed, the stuff you poured in the boxes on the planter, and it went out as a dry material, and then that did some good with the weeds. And anyhow, so at that point in time, I started working for other farmers, but I learned how to do it how the real smart farmers did it. The ones that got into the real poisons, the real weed control, the real insecticides. And I remember the counter insecticide where you back like this, and no matter what you did, you got a certain amount of it, you breathe it, and you'd have a headache and be sick for a week. But it didn't mean anything to me now. That's how big, strong farmers do it, and the real on the cutting edge of the future do it. And so anyhow, as time went on, working on these other farms off the home farm, I kind of got indoctrinated into thinking like other farmers thought and got away from the way Dad thought. And because Dad, the organic concept was not that foreign to him. He had started using a dab of 2,4-D here and there. I'd forgot about that until my brothers reminded me of that. It's amazing, when you get up in years, and I'm not really old or anything, but my daughter, I did some studying with her, and she was taking a class in geriatrics. I think geriatrics, that's like taking care of old people, and pediatrician, I think that's taking care of young people, but geriatrics taking care of old people. And in her books, it says that after you're 50 years old, you develop something called false memory. So everything I tell you today may be a false from a memory I got. But anyhow, hopefully we'll get something out of it. After working on that farm and scooping hog manure, because my thing was pulling pigs. That was my thing, pulling pigs and scooping hog manure. Because it was a purebred operation. I did work for an operation where they had confinement. So I've had a lot of experience with livestock and stuff, but it's been years since I've done that. But I can remember, just to tell you how committed I was to agriculture, on my wedding night, getting ready to leave for the honeymoon, we stopped by the house. And I had a little gilt that was farrowing. And she'd had one little pig, and it had gotten all dried off, so I knew something was wrong, because usually when one of them gets totally dried off, it's been a while since that one's been born. And so sure enough, that little gilt needed help. And, my hands, I've got a big paddle. It's not really good for reaching up inside the pig and the mother pig and pulling out the babies, because time you got your hand around the baby pig's head, you couldn't pull it through the pelvis. It's kind of like getting a handful of cookies out of the cookie jars, for those of you who never pulled any pigs. And it would get stuck, so he had to only take one cookie. Well, he couldn't take part of the pig at a time. So what I did is I went in and got my brand new spanking clean new wife and said, grab the lard, come out to the barn. And so anyway, she kind of says, what? You know, of course, on the way to the barn, I think she started to figure something out. But anyhow, I had her, because she had these long, slender fingers, and right here, that was real narrow, and a narrow, skinny arm, and it was long, too, because she's like 5'7", and I had her pull the pig out, out of the gilt, and so we got that taken care of, so we could go off onto our short honeymoon, the first one, because, you know, when you're a farmer, when it's farming season, it's up to you to get it done. There's only, unless there's a death in the family and it's yours, you better be there. You know what I'm saying? And if it's going to be yours, you better plan ahead for it, okay, and have somebody to take care of things. But anyhow, that was my experience. My last experience the year before I actually got into farming then. The guy that I had worked for all those years, 7 years, I think I worked for him. I think I was 21, 22 years old now is where I've got you up to. The farm went under bank management because his landlord had died, and the landlady turned it under bank management. And of course, they didn't see any value in having hog pastures because all these hogs were raised out in the field. They didn't see any value in alfalfa and clover. They didn't see any value in manure. It was just a waste product. And so, see, I got that knowledge and that learning and that perspective. And so anyhow, he wasn't going to get along with them, so I put in for the farm, and the landlady wanted me to get it, so that kind of helped with the situation. Plus, I had another acreage that he had promised me that I could farm. It was his half-brother that we'd been farming. I was working for him when we farmed it. So I ended up with about 1,159 acres or something like that. 259 was never going to be organic. But anyhow, after farming 1 year, and the first year was 1980, it was one of those years where the corn on the bank-managed farm, with a full shot of everything, maximum nitrogen, maximum everything, maximum, made 20 bushel acre. Black gumbo, heavy soil. On a soil that's a sandy loam, a lot lighter soil, got a lot less rainfall, corn was making over 100 bushel acre, and here's the key. My dad talked me into not putting any nitrogen on the corn after alfalfa and clover on the farm that was a sandy loam. And where we put the full shot on, you know, he said, you're going to lose money over there. You won't break even until you make, I don't know how many bushels he was saying. And so I did that, and I learned a big lesson there, that, there's something called net profit, and sometimes plowing everything into it is not the answer. So anyhow, that fall, when I was getting ready to pick the end rows off a field, Dad shows up. And of course, not having that great of relationship with my father, but he was getting smarter. You know, he's bound to gain some knowledge after a while hanging around me. But anyhow, now I'm kidding, okay? I've got a sarcastic mentality. But anyhow, I went to this meeting with Dad, and all he prefaced it was that it was farming without the chemicals, the herbicides. And so I went to the meeting with him, and it didn't take 5 minutes. A guy was telling a story about how his family owned one of the best herds of Charolais cattle in the country, and they'd won the World's Fair with their cattle. And they noticed that their cattle were getting hair coats that weren't real shiny and real healthy hair coats. They were kind of getting rough hair coats, and they were getting, runny discharge from the cow's nose, and they didn't have them healthy little sweat balls on the nose, and they had watery eyes, and their ears kind of drooped. They looked under distress. And so he just didn't know what was wrong. So he sought out Dr. Albrecht, the University of Missouri, Columbia. And first thing, according to his story, that he said was that Dr. Albrecht, when he asked him, he says, well, here's what's going wrong with my cattle. What's the problem? And Dr. Albrecht looked at him kind of puzzled. And he says, well, don't you know that the health of your livestock starts in the soil? That got me right there. That hooked me, okay? And from that point on, I started learning all about the creative processes of the soil, and this Irvin Jackson is all he talked about. Preached it over and over again about the biological proliferation and the nitrogen fixation and all this, and that if you got enough soil biology, and your soil biologists will understand this, but agronomists usually don't, because agronomists are taught, funded by the big oil companies and the Potash Institute and the Fertilizer Institute and this toot and that toot and all your companies, where the money originates from, it's all about moving product for ag business, and it's not really about building health into the soil. So anyhow, I come home, was really excited, and I knew that my landlord and landlady at that time that I farmed the 840 acres for would probably be open to this. And believe it or not, the guy from that company that promoted this concept of farming showed up there before I did. They had already signed the check. They were already in. And so there I was launched into organic agriculture before it was even organic on that acreage. And it was a thrill. My life at that time was the most exciting time I'd ever lived in my life. It's a thrill to go out there and work with living soil and get it more living as you feed it and take care of it. And so that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. That first year for me made me wonder why anybody would ever use a herbicide or insecticide. And it's been that way ever since that first experience. I've never had a year where I was confused or disappointed or anything like that since I've been farming this way, and I've never looked back. I kept the system that I used the same. I never changed it. Today, what frustrates me most, and I hurt for you people, is there's this way to do it. Oh, wait a minute, this guy's doing this, and oh, this one over here, he's doing this over here, and you're so torn. You know, when one of those circus performers, the guy that's the lion tamer, he goes into the cage with the lion, he takes a 3-legged stool or a 4-legged chair with him. Why? Because the lion can't focus on 4 or 3 points, and that confuses the lion. And here we want to get into organic agriculture, and we're hearing this, and we're reading this, and we're getting so confused. I didn't have that, and I think that's why I was blessed with so much success. It wasn't me. I'm not that good. I think it was because it was so simplistic that I could focus on what I was doing instead of being confused all the time. I had the blinders on, and I kept doing the same thing over and over again. Now, if I can find the clicker here, we'll advance this thing. If I can find how to advance it. Hey, it worked. There is the system. That's what I do. And I got to where I knew that upside down, backwards, forwards, and everything else. I didn't veer from it. And the first step is real simple. Basically, you had to do nothing to do that step. You just didn't do anything that was injurious to the soil. No insecticides, no herbicides, no acidic fertilizers. That meant no anhydrous ammonia. That meant nothing that would harm that soil at all. And the next step was promote life in the soil by inoculating soil with beneficial bacteria and microbial life. And back then they had a biological product we used that was supposed to have 44 different strains of bacteria, 8 of which were nitrogen fixers, and that's what we put on the soil. It might have been snake oil for all I know, but it sure worked nice, and it sure made amazing things happen in the soil, so we believed in it. And then the third step is promote life in the soil by using crop rotation to feed bacteria and microbial life. Note, all crops build soil if there's sufficient biology in the soil to break down the organic matter and it doesn't oxidize back off in the atmosphere through oxidation reduction. I want to get the stomach that we are living in, the stomach of the infinite creator, working as efficiently and as fast as possible. Because if you take and grow a crop, 95% of what grows out of the soil is the basic number we get. That 95% comes from the atmosphere. It's like manna from heaven. Now, what are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to take some of it, about 25% of it, and it's going to go to town in a wagon. 70% of it's left that if we do the right thing with it, we can continue to build soil through the biological processes, the nitrogen fixation, and all the law of increases that nature gives us. The challenge is we've got to create and build soil faster than we're taking nutrients from it. Now, I'll say something else right now. It's popped in my head. I'm going to say it now. I was going to say it later, but I'm going to say it now. See, this is the way I looked at the soil and the way I was taught. You take a furrow slice, 7 inches thick, off of an acre, a said silt loam. You're going to have about 2,500,000 pounds of soil. Now, I've got a Pinocchio on that. It's actually 2,378,047 ounces or something like that. But I just rounded it off to 2,500,000. Okay? Now, of that soil, we've got, let's say, a 10% organic matter level. That would be 250,000 pounds on an acre of organic matter, right? 10% of 2,500,000 is 250,000. Simple to figure. Well, let's cut that in half because I don't have 5%. I don't have 10% organic matter. I've got less than 5. I think the farm I'm farming now, the last soil test that was taken, I've never paid for a soil test. I've never had one taken, but the one that I received from the people that I took the farm over from, it's 2.5% average on the farm. One of the farms we'll be showing you today. Anyway, with that being said, if I can remember what point I was going to make here, you got to keep track of me, Dan. What was I saying? Organic matter. Okay, thank you. Who wants to keep track of me? Got to have, there, what's your name? Chet. Chet's keeping track of me. It's Chet's fault if I get and lose my place. But anyhow, there's about 125,000 pounds of organic matter. Humus, biology, organic matter. Okay, then let's add up the calcium that's available and the boron and the zinc and all them sexy words we use in the soil test world. We've got another, what, 10,000 pounds? So we got 135,000 pounds in play on the field. We've got 2,365,000 pounds of mineral that's just sitting there. Now, I don't know. I looked on the periodic table, and there's not a one of those 100 and some elements where it says stuff. There's a lot of mineral. There's a lot of potash. Dr. Bill Becker come to my farm and was going to record and make notes and watch me destroy this farm because I was depleting it. And I heard him speak at a field day in 2012, and he says the best soil test he'd ever seen in his career was on my farm. I never added a drop of phosphorus, potash, calcium, or nitrogen hauled onto that farm. Manure was spread around the one farm we had cattle on. That wasn't supposed to happen. And he says that turned his life upside down. I did not turn his life upside down. The irrefutable laws of the soil turned his life upside down. See, it's my opinion we don't have a mineral shortage in our soil. We've got a biological shortage. Okay? We were given dominion, every single one of us, dominion over all living things, and we live in the infinite Creator's stomach. What we do makes a difference. We are a digester ourselves. We have the ability to destroy the creative processes of the soil or enhance the creative processes of the soil so that we can generate nutrients faster than we're taking them off the farm, and part of it, you don't want to take them off faster than you're creating them. But we've got control of that. And that was my belief. That's what I lived. My whole life farming has been with that. I've never seen the time where it didn't work that way for me. And Dr. Bill Becker found that to be true. And he passed away here about 3 years ago, I think, I remember correctly. Nice fella. He wanted to sell me his service. He wanted, because that's what he did for a living. He had a PhD in microbiology and pathology and a master's degree in agronomy. I don't know what his bachelor's degree was in. But anyhow, he's a very smart man, a very nice man. And he would work with conventional farmers as an agronomist. That's what his job was, what he did, and an entomologist. And so it was an interesting guy to have around. It was an interesting guy to confirm that I felt it confirmed that I used to be on the right track. So anyhow, that led us up to this point. So anyhow, step number 3, where I use a rotation to feed the bacteria and microbial life, the soil microbes are my livestock. I don't have to put up electric fence, don't have to water them, but they're my livestock. And the more I feed them, the greater and larger my crops will get. You see, when a plant grows, it's a predator. Another thing I was taught. I was probably taught all wrong, but it's worked really well, so I just keep doing it. When a plant's root grows through the soil, it sucks plasma out of bacteria, leaving the shell of the bacteria as stable humus. And so the more biology I can get in the soil, the more little rabbits I got for the foxes, or more food I got for the plants. Let's say that, and I'll talk about this, probably repeat this later. Let's say that you come into a farm and you want to build that soil up and make it productive. I look at it as though it's a chicken house with a laying house, and let's say that laying house has got 1,000 chickens in it, and it's got the capability of holding 10,000 chickens, but only 1,000 chickens are in it. Now the soil, let's say, has got 1,000 pounds of biology living on an acre. It's got potential to have 10,000 pounds. Now I can take the chicken house and I can have that feed analyzed and the chicken eggs analyzed and the chicken itself analyzed to see how I can tweak that mineral balance a little bit to make those 1,000 chickens more productive. Can do the same thing to the soil to make that 1,000 pounds of biology more effective. But you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to put 9,000 more chickens in that chicken house. I think I'll increase my production. I'm going to take that soil and I'm not going to be happy with that 1,000 pounds or that 1,000 pounds of biology in the soil. I'm going to make it 10,000 pounds. And that's my attitude about the soil. It's a living creature. And that's how I think of it. That's why I've never, ever ordered or paid for a soil test. And so you're thinking, why do we listen to this and that? you know. So I've been a little unorthodox. I'm going by the old timers and what they taught me. They had most magnificent crops. When I went to Willis Wiggins back in 1981, went out on a hay rack, and we were going out there, and he stopped by this field of beans, beautiful field of beans, 38-inch rows, same as mine at that time. I had 38-inch rows. And the landowner of my dad's farm jumped from the center of the rack. He was in his 60s. He jumped from the center of the hay rack to the ground, something you don't see a man that old doing. And he says, boy, is them some kind of soybeans. And that impressed me because I thought I saw something pretty impressive. They were up to here, you know, and the most impressive thing is you went out there and you've been learning about this biology stuff in the soil. And they take the spade and they dig down and pry it up right in the center of the row, not next to the root base, but the center of the row. And there'd be nodules all along them little hair roots that were growing clear like this in the center of the row, 38-inch rows. That's impressive. I don't know if that impresses you. That just knocks my socks off. And his corn that year, it was 1980, not 1981. It was the fall of 1980. It was a really dry year. And we went all the way up there, and corn was just scorched and burned up in that area of the country. And his corn averaged 150 bushel acre in his test plot that he grew every year for Summer Brothers Golden Harvest. I think somebody probably familiar with Golden Harvest. And so, because he was a dealer for Golden Harvest. But anyhow, there was just so many impressive things that I saw. You know, on these guys' farm, you didn't see much foxtail or giant ragweed. Pretty much that was it didn't grow there. It didn't need to, so it didn't grow. So my secret to weed control is when a weed grows, accept the fact it is supposed to grow right where it's at until we change the supposed to. That make any sense? It's going to grow there. It's supposed to grow there until we change the supposed to. And that's my secret, if I had any secret to share with you, how to control weeds and grass. Row crop cultivation is a cleanup operation. It's a rescue operation. If my plans work the way I plan it and everything does what it's supposed to do, I should be able to get corn knee-high before weeds show up in the field. I should be able to get beans knee-high before weeds show up in the field. And this is the whole approach I take, okay? And I'm going to do everything I can to arrive at that point. Now here's the thing. I've told people weed control is as simple as walking up to a vending machine and having a green button that stands for smashing success and having a red button that stands for a miserable failure. And I'm going to let you know another little secret. Always push the green button. And that's what I do. So hopefully later on in the slides I'll be talking about the buttons. If I forget about it, remind me. Somebody's bound to ask me that question. And we'll go on to go to step 4 here. Number 4 is create the right environment for your biology. You want to create a firestorm. It takes a lot of oxygen. And you want to create a firestorm where that biology is sucking in oxygen out of the air. There's 70 million pounds of nitrogen above every acre. We want to get as much of that in that soil as we can, as fast as we can. So we want to keep the organic matter really shallow tillage. In fact, I don't really till the soil some of the times when I'm incorporating the organic matter. I'm just picking up a little dirt on the disc blades, on my notched disc blade, to blend it and inoculate the organic matter with biology. Because it lays on top, oxidation reduction, we're going to lose a lot of it. I want that 70%. And in the alfalfa clovers, I want 100%. I want that 95% that come from the atmosphere, not the soil. I want that in the soil, becoming humus, plant food for the next generation of plants. And so there's a way I do things that's maybe a little bit different than other people. And I want to keep it out of the anaerobic layer. A lot of organic matter, with the big horsepower tractors we got, the high horsepower tractors, we can go so deep and not really realize how deep we're going with the soil. And then we get the stuff down the anaerobic layer. Anaerobic layer may only be down that deep. Okay? And so anything that gets down deeper than that creates putrefaction, gives the soil a bellyache. And then you get foxtail as a big sign of that. Okay? I think giant ragweed could be the same thing. But I was going to say one more thing there, but it got away from me. It's like a rabbit. I didn't shoot it and capture it, so I can't eat it. So we'll move ahead here. Have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I assume that you're going to take them a mic is how we're going to do it? Okay, so everybody can see the question or hear the question either way? Okay. Okay, now here's my rotation. Here again, I don't have a broad spectrum of my abilities to converse with people with a lot of different crop varieties, like pumpkin and all that stuff, because I've stuck with the tried and true thing that worked for me. I do consulting, helping people through the transition. They call it management on some farms, what I do, but I really don't manage anything. Management in an organic system is a little bit different than management like a farm manager does, or like these management firms do, like Soy Capital, which I farm one farm for them. They've changed their name now because they merged with somebody. But anyhow, my job is a lot different than what people in the past have done that carried those titles. But I do have some farms I work fairly closely with, and of course, I do not make the go, no-go decision. Nor do I have control of the purse strings. And those are two things you must have control of if you're going to determine whether you're pushing the green button or the red button. But the first was soybeans. I was talking last night, sitting around the table with some other guys, and Harold Wilkin was there, and some of you may know Harold, and he talks about starting with soybeans when he starts. And I just did with everything he said. I sat there, I didn't say a word, but I normally always start with soybeans. Why? Because normally, with the high corn acres in the Midwest, more than likely, if you're going to transition something, it's going to be in corn stalks, and you have to work from there. So soybeans is the most common crop that I'm going to start with on a transition. Some people will put it in alfalfa clover hay. If you've got livestock and need it for that reason, that's not a bad idea, but I like to stay away from taking any alfalfa clover off the farm. Because that clover and alfalfa, especially the alfalfa, takes minerals out of that soil that we don't even know is taken out of the soil. You can do a soil test all you want, and you can replace what that soil test says you need to put back, but that soil test isn't testing for names that are that long that are on the periodic table that alfalfa is taken out of the soil. And those could be the very key that has something to do with what's happening with your weed control problems. Okay? So I don't like to see anything sold off the farm when you're selling the whole plant off the farm unless you've got a way to bring something back in the form of manure from that product that left or something similar to it to replace what you took off that we don't even measure. And so I think there's some things sometimes, the unseen sometimes is much more important than the seen. And so that could be some of the reason why some people have some serious weed problems if you're taking hay off. So I don't advise that when you're trying to transition. You think, well, I can get by 3 years without having to worry about row crop cultivating or any of that. You need to learn how to control weeds with a row crop cultivator and a rotary hoe, so might as well jump in with soybeans and learn how to do it. It's not going to get any better if you run from it. The second crop would be the small grains, wheat, oats, barley, interseeded with alfalfa, clover, and grasses. Now, there's so many things that I can just spend hours on talking about. There's just so much to be said. My most important crop is the alfalfa, clover, and the grasses. I don't worry about my cash crops, what we call cash crops. I consider the soil builders my cash crop. If you talk about fiat currency, the money that the Fed prints, okay, then your corn and soybeans and wheat, that's your cash crop. But if you're thinking about building soil and building stable humus into that bank account and the unstable humus in the checking account, then I build a lot more of that on my year's alfalfa clover, where I have it 2 total years, and both years nothing is ever taken off. It's all fed back to the soil. I feel that I have my yields are 25% better, and I got 25% less work to do. That kind of makes me greedy and lazy, doesn't it? I have people all the time tell me that they got bills to pay. I feel I come out better with a 4-year rotation, feeding that biology and bumping my yields up, getting rid of insect problems, getting rid of weed pressure and grass pressure. And if you have a rain event or something like that, you can handle it. If you have a drought event, you can handle it. So when it all works out, the piece of paper you do your doodling on to figure your budget and everything, it doesn't rain on that piece of paper. It doesn't hail on that piece of paper. The weeds don't take that piece of paper. But in reality, out there on the farm, those things happen. So some rotations look more profitable, but in reality, they don't turn out that way. Okay, number 3, that's the year it stays in legume grass mix the whole entire year, and I'll have slides of that. That's building the soil immensely. The roots are going down deep because the alfalfa goes down real deep. I was taught by the old timers. They said you want to work your soil from deep to shallow. Alfalfa goes down deep. It has to go down deep because with the clovers and grasses, it's got to go deep for what it wants because there's nothing up here with the clovers and alfalfa. So it forces the alfalfa to go 5, 6, 7 foot deep in a 2 year span of time. or the sweet clover and some of the others. Then the red clovers and the clovers are intermediate rooted. They take care of that area that's a little bit shallower depth. And then the grass is fibrous, takes care of the area that's real shallow. Now, naturally, grass can go deep, clovers can go deep, but we've got a good spectrum of root depth and varieties, and we work the whole area. Then my last year, number 4 in this rotation is corn, and I always interseed it with cereal rye. Either fly it on, put it on with a fertilizer buggy, work the ground and drill it in or whatever to make sure I get a good stand. Now, I am adding some things. This year I aerial seeded. Good thing I did. This year it started raining around the last of October, and a lot of people have beans and corn still out because of that. Some people didn't get their wheat sowed. I got everything done, and that's not like me. I'm usually one of them that gets caught. But anyhow, I seeded 2 bushel of cereal rye to the acre, and with that, annual ryegrass, crimson clover, rapeseed, radish, turnip, oats. I think that whole mix and the flying on was about $134. And you know, when you're grossing about $2,000 with organic corn, who gives a rip about $134 an acre? You know, because I've got to feed the biology. They eat at the first table. If they're hungry, guess who's going to be hungry someday? And I want to keep them well fed. So I want to get a good thick stand, and it's growing right now in the field. I didn't have any pictures taken of it yet, but it'll wake up and really go to town. So I think that's all I need to say about that slide. I'll move on. There's a lot more information I can give you, and I hope you have some questions. This gives you an idea of where I'm at. I grew up around the area that I'm farming now. I went kind of back to where I was because I'm familiar with the soil types. This is an irrigation map of Mason County where I'm from. That's in 2012. After 2012 was a really dry year, there's a lot more irrigation than there is there. All the green dots is irrigation. And I think now we're over like 85%, somebody said. I'd have to verify that. But over 85% irrigated in this county. And some of it needs to be irrigated, some of it really doesn't. But right there, can you see that red dot? Right there, there's about 200 acres here, or 160. But this down here is probably 200. Right in this corner right up there, that 40 acres there is not irrigated. Okay? That's a farm that I started farming in 2015 was my first crop. You'll see some pictures of the soybeans. I started transitioning that year from a corn stalks that were GMO that was farmed by a previous farmer. And now I'm purchasing that farm. But irrigation all around me. I have no irrigation. Well, I've got irrigation, but mine is Mother Nature's irrigation. And we'll talk about that as I'm explaining what I do and how I think about that. But anyhow, that's where one of the farms is at. And I've got another, whoops, didn't want to show that yet. Got to learn how to operate this thing. And then the other farm, if I can hit the right button, is right around down here. It's in Menard County, across the creek here from Mason County. And right up here you can see we're pretty much straight across from where we're at right now. Pretty much straight across. You get on 136 and head that way. 136 goes 7 miles north of that one farm that's got the irrigation around it. So that's where I'm located, in a county that's got fairly light soil. And I like the lighter soil. If I was going to take my choice and I could have any farm, I'd want a Class B farm that's a sandy loam over a rich black soil. I don't see anything to gain by rich black soil because I'm going to make this soil perform like rich black soil. The reason why rich black soil brings so much money is it still has a lot of carbon in it to be mined yet. See, fertilizers really aren't fertilizers. That's been a hijacked term. Fertilizer are soil extractants, and they keep making the carbon in the soil, the humus, water soluble so it can be fed into the plant and then hauled off in the wagon. And we're selling our farms a load of grain at a time. And what we want to do is reverse that process and work towards that. Okay, we'll go on to the next one now. I can learn how to operate this thing. Okay, here's the field of beans. I'm going to give you a surround shot at it. This is what I expect 100% of the time on organic. Okay. I don't ever expect to have anything look as bad as the conventional fields. We should have better crops. Why? Because of how we treat the soil. And when you've got a biologically active soil, you shouldn't have the weed pressure. You shouldn't have the grass pressure, because that's a sign the soil's starved to death, it's hungry, it wants something to eat, and it's going to get something to eat one way or another. It loves us so much, it's going to help us be successful. That's why weeds and grass are here. But anyhow, this field was walked twice. Some years it cost $20, $25 an acre. That's total. Working, maybe $12 one time and $10 the next time to get it walked. And I've got my cousin's children. He's got, I think they're between 10 and 16 years of age. I think one of them was about 11. Another one was 16. They walk for me in the bean field. I pay them extremely well. And that's what we should do. We should share a little bit. When you're selling soybeans like that for over $20 a bushel, there's enough money to pay a bean walker really well, and I don't have to bring people in that are Hispanics or anything like that. I find out what Monsanto's paying their detoxers, and I make sure I pay more. Okay? And that's only right, the way it should be. Same thing, I pay the guy, my cousin, harvests my crop, and I pay him based on organic prices, not conventional prices, to share with him fairly and evenly. I just think it's good policy, it's a good community thing, it's what we should do. But here's a surround shot, if I can learn what button to push here. If it's a John Deere, I can run it. This isn't a John Deere. You never, if you drove by, would have ever seen a weed in this field. I intend my beans to get pretty good size. What happened to this field, I want to make sure I make this point. I planted the beans, I think it was on June 1st. I may be off a day or so, but I think it was June 1st. We normally rotary hoe on the 4th day, but if it's going to rain, I'm going to rotary hoe on the 3rd day. It started raining on the 3rd day. Rained 24 inches in 25 days. It was never rotary hoed. Now, I'll assure you, anybody else I know that has that happen, it's a disaster and it's a loss. But that's what I end up with. I don't think I'm that smart, guys. I think it's because of the biological processes in the soil, the nitrogen fixation, the biological processes, the creative processes in the soil, that if we get that soil working right, then the weed seeds are going to stay dormant and asleep. Now, I could be all wrong, maybe I'm all wet, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Yes, sir.
How did you get to that point when this was year one, right?
Yes, sir.
You're on a transition.
Yes, sir.
About waking the biology up, but if you're inheriting a degraded soil
yes.
from someone else, does it turn around? I mean, was there something else that you did before? Or?
Yes, I'll probably go into that. I'm going to have him ask that.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I will. I'll repeat the question. He wanted to know, this is T1, this is the first year of organic, T1, and he wants to know what I did to get to this point. And I will go over that now, being we got a question. I'll probably go over it again later, because I need to hear it again. What I normally do is I go into corn stalks in the fall of the year, and I realize that that soil has been compromised because GMO corn, we know, affects the biological diversity in the soil negatively. I want to reverse that property that as rapidly as possible. It is paramount that I do that. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my spade, and I'm going to go out there, and if I've got a 40-acre field, I'm going to dig 4 holes. And I'm going to dig them a foot by a foot and a foot deep. That's a cubic foot. And I'm going to count the earthworms. Okay? Now, on the one farm I'll talk about first was 70 acres. That's the second one I did. And I did, everything landed perfect how I do it, so I'll talk about that one. So on that farm, I dug 7 holes. And I counted the earthworms, looked for earthworm castings, and I just that's my soil test. See? What I can see with the human eye. I'm not a microbiologist. If I've got earthworms, earthworms eat biology. So the earthworms is the sign that I can see with the human eye of what's happening. On this 170 acres that we'll see in a little bit, it looks just like it, but it's just a year later, I had 0 earthworms or earthworm holes in the bottom of the foot-deep pit, okay, in number 1 hole. Number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7. I had 0 earthworms. It was conventionally tilled and conventionally fertilized and conventionally everything. Okay, it was not no-till. No-tills you'd have found some earthworms, okay, even under conventional no-till. But anyhow, I had 0 biology to the level that I normally can start out with. And so what I'm going to do is next is I'm going to put on a biological inoculant. I want to get that stuff decomposed. I want to wake up the stomach that we're living in. I want to get the biology starting to work as rapidly as I possibly can. I turned my ringer up so I could know when 225 was here. Got a phone call. But anyhow, I use a product called Residues. There are other products out there, and I spray that on the stalks before I do anything to them. I put it at the recommended rate. I use 20 gallons of water to the acre because I want to get a good soaking in them stalks. And then I've got a little machine that I use for my primary tillage. It's a flail shredder with sharp knives. I sharpen the knives. I want to pulverize this stuff to as close to a powder as I can. Make it baby food for those biology because they're sick, and I want to bring them back to life. And behind that, I pull a little 14-foot IH500 disc with notch blades on it, 24-inch notch blades on it. And I go out there, and I only work it about that deep. I'm basically just scarifying things and scratching up enough dirt that I can get that digestive process working as rapidly as I possibly can. Okay. Another thing I did before I shredded it and did it is I put a product on this Leonardite coal. Leonardite coal was formed under anaerobic conditions. It was everything that grew out of the soil back before there was any bad things on the earth. And so it has trace minerals, carbon, but I'm putting it on for the carbon source. Basically what I'm trying to do. Have you ever read about people that are sickly and they found now that they can actually make put a transplant feces from a healthy person into that person and get the biology back in their intestinal tract and totally turn around those people's health? Well, that's basically what I'm doing to the soil. I'm going to try to create the conditions because the carbon helps to detoxify that soil and and tie up the poisons, the toxins that are in it. It also just kickstarts the biology. The earthworm population will just explode after that if you create the right environment for it. And it's so important. So once I get it worked with the shredder and the disking really, really light, then what I do is I'm going to wait about 3, 4, 5, 6 days. And this is in the fall of the year now, okay? And at that point in time, I'm going to hit it real, real lightly again to turn my compost, to get air in there again now, the no-tillers thinking, boy, he's burning up the carbon. And yeah, I'm going to create a biological firestorm. That's what I want to do to detoxify the soil and get the earthworms and the population of everything going. And so, but I've also put on carbon, okay? So we're beyond carbon neutral, we're carbon positive. So the point is then that when I get that done, then I'm going to seed cereal rye. And what I did, because I'm working on this no-till thinking of organic, where you have cereal rye, you roll it and no-till soybeans into it, I'm trying to perfect step one because you see, I'm very obsessive compulsive. I don't want anything but excellence, and there's no room for failure, in my opinion. Okay, so I put on 3/4 of a bushel of rye, sow in one direction in the field, and then I went crossways and sowed a bushel and a quarter. I'd have put a bushel on both times, but I was a little light. It figured when I got done with the 70 acres, so I just upped the rate so I get the full 2 bushel an acre on crisscrossing. Now, we can say, well, Gary, is that necessary? Is it necessary to put a biological on it? Is it necessary to use 20 gallons of water to the acre? Is it necessary to shred those stalks of it? Is it necessary? See, I'm green button, green button, green button, green button, green button, green button. You see what I mean? It's totally pulling the stops out. I'm going to do everything I can to get that biology back in that soil. It's desperate for my help. I was given dominion over all living things. I was given that ability because of my position in the ecosystem. So anyhow, I get the rye going. The rye grows up beautiful. Whole field turns green. Does great all fall. We had one of them falls where this worked. This is the ideal situation. I batted 1,000% that fall. And then the next year that grew up, and I'd go out there in the field with my spade. I never pull an implement in the field, but what I don't take my spade and walk that field. Period. When it's my field and what I farm myself, I never pull an implement in that field, but what I don't walk the field first. And I always walk in a diamond pattern. Middle of the field, I head the middle over there, the middle back there, the middle over there, and the middle back up here. I don't know why I do that. Just do it that way, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that spade in the soil about 6 inches at about a 30-degree angle, and I'm going to pry it up. And I'm going to take that dirt off the tip of that spade. And I'm going to compress it as hard as I can between in my hand. And then I'm going to take it, and I'm going to take it like that. If it smears, there's no tractor going to pull on that field. Okay? And nobody better, they're going to get your tire shot out. Okay? My dad run a landowner off of the farm that we grew up on when he pulled out in the field when Dad was planting. The field is not a road. Okay? And Dad was adamant about that, and so am I. And some people think I'm crazy when they're out there working their ground and everything, and I'm not doing anything. Farmers will go to the town and they'll say, well, what's Gary doing? Isn't Gary going to do anything this year? And here's the key, see. That rye is growing, if you put the figures together, 387 miles of aggregate roots in the life of that rye plant. It grows the most from April 1st to May 15th, probably at the rate of about 2 million rye roots per acre per day. I was busy. You see? We can work smart or we can work hard. Okay? We can make money and have success, or we can make excuses. We can't have both. And I'm going to build that soil. So anyway, I forgot to tell you that when I get out of my truck, Stupid rides along in the truck with me. I got a buddy named Stupid. Okay? Stupid sits right here, and as soon as I get out of the truck, Stupid jumps right up on that shoulder. Stupid never shuts up. And as I'm walking out of the field, Stupid is trying to convince me I need to get out there and work that ground about 3 days before it's ready. Oh, your neighbors will never know. Go ahead and work it. That Harold make that look on top. It's like perfect seed bed. And Stupid wants me to let that rye not get very big. You know, oh, well, Gary will get away from me. What are you going to do then? See? Stupid hates our guts. Stupid wants us to be destroyed. He wants our kids to be all sick. He wants us to have crop failure after crop failure. He wants our economy to collapse. Stupid hates us. Now, Stupid's not really stupid. I have to apologize for calling him that name, but when I listen to him, I do stupid stuff. It's like, oh my goodness, what'd I do, and why'd I do that? Okay? But anyhow, and I think my timer went off, so we're going to be taking a break here, but I'm going to finish up this thought if I don't forget it. But anyhow, Stupid controls all the governments of the world. Stupid controls our universities. Stupid controls the media. Stupid isn't really stupid. But we have to learn to take our 3-pound brain and make sure and understand when we're listening to Stupid or when we're listening to the truth. And that's so vital if we want to have a vibrant farm that's weed-free and grass-free, because when you listen to Stupid, that increases the pestilence. Weeds, grass, insects, cancer, heart disease, ADHD, autism, okay? Only when we get our soil back and get back to the root of the problem do we solve our weeds, our grass, our insects, and blah, 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 blah. So with that, we'll stop unless you got a quick question.
Yeah, let's give Gary a round of applause. Yeah, we'd be glad to take a question or two.
Scared them to death.
You wowed them or
They're
scared
scared.
them? Either one. Yeah.
How do you kill cereal rye with a 2-inch incorporation? The root balls keep growing when it rains, it seems, every time.
Joel, that's a very good question. Once the rye gets a certain size, and I'm going to get it right before it starts under ideal conditions, I'm going to try to get it right before it starts what's the right term? No. When it starts moving the protein from the leaves into the berry, okay? Because I don't think I gain much more energy at that point in time. It's going to convert from a proteinaceous plant to a lignin plant. And if I put lignin in the soil, wonderful thing. It builds stable humus, cation exchange capacity. So even the booby prize is good with rye. So if it gets too big, not a problem. But I want to catch it when I get the most amount of energy, when it's as large as it can get before it starts translocating. That's the word I wanted to find, into the berry. And that's when I try to work it in. And when you shred it then, about that low, it's pretty much toast. It's pretty much at stage it's not going to regrow. And
all right. That's a great question. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and Gary's going to pick right back up where he left off. So ask me some questions or submit them via the app, and we'll get through those as we roll.